Right, stop everything because what I'm about to show you is a driving technique developed and refined over decades in Japan that reduces fuel consumption by between 20 and 30%, and it costs absolutely nothing to implement. No modifications, no additives, no expensive products. Just a specific way of using a car that Japanese drivers call eco-drive, and that has been so thoroughly validated by real-world data that Japan's government made it part of official driver training in 2007. British drivers are paying hundreds of pounds more per year in fuel than they need to. And the gap between what they're spending and what they could be spending comes down entirely to technique. I want to be specific about what 30% means in practical terms. On a car consuming £60 of fuel per week at current prices, 30% is £18 saved weekly. That's over £900 annually. On the same car, same routes, same journeys, simply driven differently. Stay with me. In 50 seconds, I'm going to describe the single most counterintuitive element of eco-drive, the one thing that Japanese driving schools teach that directly contradicts what most British drivers believe about efficient driving. When I explain it, you'll immediately understand why the technique works so dramatically better than conventional fuel-saving advice. It changes how you think about every journey you make. But first, here's the number that made Japanese transport engineers take this seriously enough to study it formally. When a test group of ordinary drivers was taught eco-drive principles and monitored over 12 weeks of normal everyday driving, their average fuel consumption fell by 23% without any change to their vehicles, their routes, or their journey frequency. 23% from technique alone, validated across hundreds of drivers in real traffic conditions. 23% from technique alone, validated across hundreds of drivers in real traffic conditions, not laboratory measurements, not manufacturer test cycles, real drivers, real roads, real savings. Subscribe right now. Drop a comment telling me what car you drive and roughly what you spend on fuel monthly, because by the end of this video you'll be able to calculate exactly what this technique could save you specifically. Let's get into it. Before the specific techniques, you need to understand the underlying principle, because once you understand it, every individual element of eco-drive makes complete logical sense rather than feeling like a disconnected list of tips. The fundamental insight of Japanese eco-drive is this: fuel consumption is not primarily about speed, it's about momentum change. Every time you accelerate, you consume fuel to build momentum. Every time you brake, you destroy that momentum. The energy that took fuel to create is converted to heat and lost through the brake pads. The engine then has to use more fuel to rebuild the momentum you just destroyed. Conventional British driving advice focuses almost entirely on speed. Drive slower, use higher gears earlier, don't exceed certain speeds on motorways. This advice isn't wrong, but it addresses a secondary variable. The primary variable is how often and how violently you change momentum. And that happens regardless of what speed you're traveling at. A driver doing 40 miles per hour who constantly accelerates hard to closing gaps and then brakes firmly is consuming dramatically more fuel than a driver doing 50 miles per hour who maintains smooth, consistent progress. Speed is visible and measurable. Momentum management is invisible, which is why it's been under-addressed in conventional fuel economy advice for decades. Japanese eco-drive addresses the primary variable directly. Every technique it teaches is ultimately about protecting momentum once built and minimizing the energy wasted in momentum destruction cycles. Technique number 1, the 10-second look ahead. This is the counterintuitive element I mentioned at the opening. Japanese eco-drive teaches drivers to extend their visual focus from the immediate few car lengths ahead, where most British drivers habitually focus, to a minimum of 10 seconds ahead, which at 30 miles per hour is approximately 130 meters, and at 70 miles per hour is approximately 300 meters. The reason this is counterintuitive is that most British drivers believe they're already looking far enough ahead. The reality consistently demonstrated in driving behavior research is that the majority of urban and suburban drivers have a visual focus horizon of 3 to 5 seconds. They react to what's happening close to them rather than anticipating what's developing far ahead. The practical consequence of this short focus horizon is continuous unintended momentum destruction. A traffic light turns amber 200 meters ahead. The driver with a 3-second horizon doesn't see it until they're 60 meters away and brakes firmly. The driver with a 10-second horizon sees it at 200 meters and simply removes their foot from the accelerator. The car decelerates gently using engine braking, the light changes to green before they reach it, and they pass through with minimal speed loss and zero fuel used during the coasting approach. The driver with the 3-second horizon burned fuel to reach 60 meters from the light, burned brake pads stopping, and now burns fuel accelerating away. The 10-second look-ahead driver coasted, maintained useful speed, and rejoined normal traffic flow. Same journey. Dramatically different fuel consumption. The technique applies to everything ahead of you, not just traffic lights. Queue of traffic forming 200 meters ahead, foot off the accelerator now. Roundabout coming up 300 meters ahead, begin natural deceleration now. Junction ahead where you can see cross traffic moving. Anticipate the give-way requirement and coast toward it. In every case, the earlier you identify the deceleration requirement, the more of your existing momentum you protect and the less fuel you waste accelerating back to speed afterward. Japanese driving schools report that the 10-second look ahead alone, properly applied, accounts for approximately 12 to 15% of the total fuel saving achieved through eco-drive. It's the single highest impact individual element. Technique number 2, the slow acceleration discipline. The second technique addresses the other end of the momentum equation, how momentum is built rather than how it's lost. EcoDrive teaches that the most efficient acceleration profile is deliberately slower than most drivers instinctively use, applied consistently from a lower engine speed range than British drivers typically use. The specific target is to accelerate at approximately half the rate drivers naturally default to, staying below 2,000 revolutions per minute in petrol cars and 1,500 in diesel, reaching the target speed gradually over a longer distance rather than quickly over a short one. The counterintuitive element here is that slower acceleration feels wrong to most drivers. There's a deep-seated instinct to accelerate briskly to get out of the inefficient lower speed range and into the efficient cruising range as quickly as possible. This instinct is wrong. The energy consumed during hard acceleration significantly exceeds the energy consumed during slow acceleration to the same speed, even accounting for the longer time spent at lower speeds. Think of it this way: hard acceleration is like carrying a heavy load upstairs by running. You get to the top faster, but you've expended far more energy than walking. Gentle acceleration is like walking up those stairs. It takes longer, but the total energy cost is substantially lower. The practical application requires resisting the temptation to accelerate with traffic when everyone around you is doing so aggressively. Let the gap in front of you open slightly. Maintain your gentle acceleration. You'll typically reach the same cruising speed within a few seconds of the driver who accelerated hard, while having used meaningfully less fuel doing so. Technique number 3. Gear selection ahead of British convention. Japanese EcoDrive specifies earlier upshifting than British drivers are typically taught, and higher gear selection at lower speeds than most British drivers habitually use. The specific guidance change up to the next gear as soon as the engine is pulling cleanly without labouring, which in most modern cars means changing up at around 1,500 to 2,000 revolutions per minute. British drivers are commonly advised to change at around 2,000 to 2,500 revolutions. That 500 revolution gap sounds small but represents meaningful additional fuel consumption across every gear change in every journey. In terms of speed and gear combinations, EcoDrive targets having the car in the highest practical gear at every moment. For many modern cars, this means being in 5th or 6th gear at speeds as low as 40 miles per hour on level roads, significantly earlier than most British drivers select those gears. The technique requires understanding the distinction between the engine labouring, which uses more fuel, creates mechanical stress and should be avoided, and the engine pulling cleanly at low revolutions, which is the efficient operating condition EcoDrive is targeting. The sensation is a very light engine load, the accelerator barely depressed, the engine barely audible, the car moving smoothly with minimal mechanical resistance. Modern fuel injection systems are highly efficient at low load and low revolution conditions. The conventional belief that engines need to rev freely to operate efficiently dates from carburetor technology and simply doesn't apply to fuel-injected engines built since the 1990s. Using high gears at low revolutions in a modern fuel-injected car is the correct efficient operating mode, not a misuse of the drivetrain. Technique number 4. Fuel cut coasting. This is the technique that most surprises British drivers, and that produces the most dramatic immediate fuel savings for drivers who understand and apply it correctly. Modern fuel-injected engines have a feature that virtually no British driver has been explicitly told about. When the accelerator is released completely while the car is in gear and above approximately 1,500 revolutions per minute, the fuel injection system cuts fuel delivery to the engine entirely. The engine continues running, driven by the car's momentum through the transmission, but it's consuming zero fuel. zero fuel, while the car is moving, while the engine is running, simply because you've released the accelerator completely while remaining in gear. This is called overrun fuel cut or deceleration fuel cut, and it's present in essentially every fuel-injected petrol and diesel car sold since the mid-1990s. The threshold varies slightly between cars, typically between 1,200 and 1,800 revolutions per minute. But the principle is universal in modern vehicles. EcoDrive teaches drivers to use this feature deliberately and extensively. Anytime you identify a deceleration requirement ahead, using your 10-second look ahead, you remain in the highest appropriate gear, release the accelerator completely, and allow the car to coast in gear toward the developing situation. During this entire approach, fuel consumption is zero. The car is decelerating smoothly using engine braking, controlled by the transmission rather than the brakes, and the engine is using no fuel whatsoever. The contrast with conventional British braking, which involves remaining in gear briefly, then typically changing down through gears while also applying the brake, or simply declutching and coasting in neutral, is significant. Coasting in neutral disengages the engine from the drivetrain, which causes the fuel injection system to resume delivering fuel to keep the engine idling. Counterintuitively, coasting in neutral uses more fuel than coasting in gear because the in-gear fuel cut is more complete than idle fuel delivery. British drivers who learn about overrun fuel cut typically report that it changes their entire relationship with their accelerator pedal. Once you know fuel consumption is zero every time you completely release the accelerator in gear above 1,500 revolutions, you find opportunities to use it constantly, opportunities that were invisible before. Technique number 5. Tyre pressure as a fuel variable. Japanese EcoDrive includes tyre pressure management as a core technique rather than a background maintenance item, because the fuel consumption impact of tyre pressure is larger than most British drivers realise, and the check takes under 5 minutes monthly. Underinflated tyres create additional rolling resistance. The tyre deforms more under load, creating a larger contact patch that requires more energy to move. The fuel required to overcome that additional rolling resistance comes directly from additional engine fuel consumption. The specific data from Japanese transport research: tyres running 10% below recommended pressure increase fuel consumption by approximately 1% per tyre. 4 tyres each 10% low adds roughly 4% to total fuel consumption. Tyres 20% below recommended pressure, which is not unusual for cars that haven't been checked in several months, add 8 to 10% to fuel consumption across the 4 corners. For a driver spending £80 monthly on fuel, correct tyre pressure alone could represent £6 to £8 monthly in savings. It costs nothing and takes 5 minutes with a gauge available at any petrol station forecourt. The EcoDrive guidance is specific. Check cold, weekly if possible, monthly at minimum. Cold means before the car has been driven more than a couple of miles in the current session, because driving generates heat that temporarily increases pressure and gives falsely optimistic readings. Check all 4 tyres including the spare. Use the pressure specified in the car's door jamb or fuel filler cap sticker, not the maximum pressure molded into the tyre sidewall. The sidewall figure is the tyre's maximum, not the car's optimal operating pressure. Technique number 6. Air conditioning discipline. Air conditioning is the largest single parasitic load on a car's engine after the alternator, and EcoDrive addresses its use specifically because the fuel consumption impact is significantly larger than most British drivers assume. A car's air conditioning compressor adds approximately 2 to 3 kilowatts of mechanical load to the engine when operating. At motorway speeds, that represents approximately 10% of the engine's total output being diverted to cooling the cabin rather than propelling the car. At lower speeds, where less total power is required, air conditioning represents a larger proportional load, sometimes 15 to 20% of total engine output on a warm day in slow urban traffic. The specific EcoDrive guidance on air conditioning: use it purposefully rather than habitually. British climate rarely requires sustained air conditioning at full output. The technique is to pre-cool the cabin by running air conditioning for the first few minutes of a journey, then switching to recirculation mode and reducing the cooling demand, or switching to fan only on all but the warmest days. Window management matters too. At speeds below 50 miles per hour, open windows have negligible aerodynamic cost and provide adequate ventilation without air conditioning load. Above 50 miles per hour, open windows create meaningful aerodynamic drag that can exceed the fuel cost of air conditioning. The EcoDrive rule of thumb: below 50 miles per hour, open windows preferred. Above 50 miles per hour, close windows and use air conditioning at minimum necessary setting. Stop. 6 techniques covered. And if you're tracking the potential savings, they already stack up significantly. 10-second look ahead, eliminating unnecessary momentum destruction, 12 to 15%. Slow acceleration discipline, 5 to 8%. Early gear selection, 3 to 4%. Overrun fuel cut, 4 to 6%. Correct tire pressure, 2 to 4%. Air conditioning discipline, 2 to 5%. These percentages overlap and interact rather than simply adding. A driver who implements all 6 doesn't save 40% because the techniques share some of the same underlying fuel consumption reduction. The validated overall saving from drivers applying the complete EcoDrive system consistently is 20 to 30%, depending on existing driving habits and journey type. But there are 2 more techniques to cover. And the second of these 2 is the one that Japanese EcoDrive practitioners describe as the technique that makes all the others sustainable. The mental shift that turns EcoDrive from a conscious effort into an automatic way of using a car. I'll explain it shortly. Drop a comment right now. Tell me which of these 6 techniques you already do naturally and which ones you've never heard of. Because the pattern in those answers tells me exactly where the biggest savings are hiding for most British drivers. Technique number 7, route and timing optimization. Japanese EcoDrive extends beyond driving style into journey planning, specifically the recognition that when and how you travel has fuel consumption implications that dwarf anything achievable through technique alone on an inefficiently timed journey. The fundamental point is that stop-start traffic is the most fuel-inefficient driving condition that exists. Every stop destroys all built momentum. Every subsequent acceleration rebuilds it from zero. A journey covering 5 miles in 40 minutes of stop-start urban traffic consumes dramatically more fuel than the same 5 miles covered in 15 minutes of free-flowing traffic. Not because of speed differences, but because of the continuous momentum destruction cycles that stop-start conditions force. EcoDrive teaches specific journey timing analysis. The same route at different times of day can have 2 or 3 times the stop frequency. Leaving 15 minutes earlier or later to avoid peak congestion periods frequently saves more fuel than any driving technique can recover during the congested journey itself. Route choice matters similarly. The shortest route is frequently not the most fuel-efficient route. A route that's 2 miles longer but travels on faster, less congested roads with fewer junctions, and traffic lights will often use less fuel than the direct route through town, because the momentum destruction events on the shorter route exceed the additional distance costs of the longer one. The practical tool recommended in EcoDrive: before regular commuting routes, time them at different departure points over several weeks to identify the minimum congestion window. A shift of 20 minutes in departure time frequently produces fuel savings of 10 to 15% on urban commuting routes, savings that no amount of in-car technique can match if you're leaving at the wrong time. Technique number 8, the feedback loop, using your fuel economy display. This is the technique that makes EcoDrive sustainable rather than effortful, and it's the one that Japanese driving schools report has the most transformative effect on long-term driving behavior. Every car sold in Britain since approximately 2010 has an instantaneous fuel economy display, typically shown in miles per gallon or litres per 100 kilometres on the driver information display. Most British drivers have seen this figure. Almost none use it actively as a real-time feedback mechanism during driving, which is precisely what EcoDrive teaches. The instantaneous fuel economy display is the most direct possible feedback mechanism for every driving decision you make. Accelerate gently. The display shows 50, 60, 70 miles per gallon. Accelerate hard. It drops to 15, 20. Coast in gear approaching a red light. It shows instantaneous infinity. The fuel cut is active. Consumption is 0. Sit in neutral at idle. It shows 30 to 40 miles per gallon, confirming the engine is consuming fuel even while stationary. Using this display actively, not occasionally glancing at it but genuinely monitoring it as a real-time performance metric for your driving decisions, creates a feedback loop that trains efficient driving instincts without conscious effort. Within a few weeks of active display monitoring, the behaviors that produce high economy readings become automatic because the brain's natural optimization instinct drives them without requiring deliberate thought. Japanese eco-drive research found that drivers who actively use the instantaneous economy display as a feedback mechanism maintained their fuel savings at full levels for months and years after completing formal eco-drive training, while drivers who learned the techniques without the display feedback tended to drift back toward old habits within weeks. The display creates the self-sustaining feedback mechanism that makes the learning permanent. The practical application: find your car's instantaneous economy display if you haven't already. It's typically accessible through the driver information menu on the central display or instrument cluster. Set it as the primary displayed figure during normal driving. Spend 2 weeks actively monitoring it, treating every driving decision as an experiment to move the number higher. By the end of those 2 weeks, the behaviors producing high readings will have become instinct rather than conscious technique. Right then, 8 techniques from Japanese eco-drive that together reduce fuel consumption by 20 to 30%. Technique 1. The 10-second look ahead, eliminating unnecessary momentum destruction before it happens by identifying deceleration requirements far earlier than conventional British driving habits allow. The single highest impact individual element of the entire system. Technique 2. Slow acceleration discipline, building momentum gradually at low engine revolutions to minimize the energy cost of each momentum building event, rather than accelerating quickly and wasting energy in the process. Technique 3. Early gear selection, using the highest practical gear at every moment and recognizing that modern fuel-injected engines are most efficient at low load and low revolutions, rather than revving freely as older carburetor advice suggested. Technique 4. Overrun fuel cut, the feature present in every modern fuel-injected car where releasing the accelerator completely while in gear above approximately 1500 revolutions produces zero fuel consumption, a feature almost no British driver has been explicitly told about, despite it being present in every car they've driven for decades. Technique 5. Tyre pressure management as a fuel variable, with tyres 20% below recommended pressure, adding 8 to 10% to total fuel consumption. Recoverable in 5 minutes with a gauge. Technique 6. Air conditioning discipline, using purposeful rather than habitual cooling and understanding the open window versus air conditioning threshold at 50 miles per hour. Technique 7. Route and timing optimization, recognizing that departure time and route choice frequently produce larger fuel savings than any in-car technique can achieve on a poorly timed journey through congested conditions. Technique 8. The feedback loop, using the instantaneous economy display as a real-time performance metric, the technique that makes all the others automatic and sustainable rather than requiring permanent conscious effort. The combined saving for a driver currently spending £80 weekly on fuel, £16 to £24 per week, £800 to £1,200 annually, on the same car, same journeys, same destinations. Drop a comment, tell me your current fuel spend and which of these 8 techniques you're going to try first. And tell me if you already do any of them, because some British drivers have discovered elements of this independently without knowing it's a formal system with validated data behind it. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because next week we're covering the specific engine management settings and drive mode configurations that the manufacturers include in modern cars specifically to support eco-drive principles. Settings that most owners never find because they're not in the owner's manual in any useful way. Right then, that's it from me today. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most expensive fuel is the fuel you didn't need to burn. See you next time. Cheers!